Hi. In the previous lesson, we looked at matter and the properties of matter and how matter can be regarded to be either atoms or elements or even molecules and compounds. So for now, you can think of a molecule as the smallest unit of an element or a compound that retains all the properties of that element or compound. So a molecule is the smallest unit of an element or compound that retains all of the properties of that element or compound. So we looked at examples like oxygen molecule, like nitrogen molecule, like carbon dioxide molecule, like water molecule, and we said that these ones are elements and these ones are compounds. Compounds made of more than one element. In this unit, we will be looking at something or the properties, we will be looking at another theme. The theme here is all substances have characteristic properties. All substances have characteristic properties. This is the main idea here. So the main idea here in this lesson or unit is that all substances have characteristic properties. So every substance, whether it is an element or a compound, has characteristic properties. So chemists use properties to distinguish between substances. Chemists use properties to distinguish. They use properties to distinguish between substances. So if we don't know the property of a substance, then you cannot be able to categorize it or to separate it from others. So what we say here is that to distinguish a substance, then you have to use the properties. So most chemist investigations are related to or depend on the properties of substance. So what is a property? A property may be a characteristic that defines an entire group. A property A property may be a characteristic that defines an entire group. That defines an entire group of substances. That defines an entire group of substances. So what we are saying here, to look at the characteristics of a substance and group it as a specific substance, then that is what we are meaning when we are looking at property here. You must be able to look at the characteristic that defines a specific group. So that will give you what a property is. Like if we took an example of supports burning, if we say something supports burning, like oxygen supports burning. This is a property of oxygen. This is a property of oxygen. When we say that water, for example, boils at 100 degrees Celsius, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, this is again a property of water. So that property can be used to classify an unknown substance as a member of that group. That substance can be used to classify an unknown substance, as a member of that group. As a member of that group. For example, many elements can either be classified as metals. They can be classified as metal depending on their characteristics or their properties. So the distinguishing property of metals is that they conduct electricity. See, this is just an example. For example, the distinguishing property of metals is that they conduct electricity. So if you take a substance and try it with electricity and electricity does not pass through it, then you cannot regard it as being a metal. But if it happens that it can conduct electricity, then there is high chance that this substance is a metal. Therefore, an unknown element, if tested and found to conduct electricity well, it is a metal. So properties can help reveal the identity of an unknown substance. Properties can help identify. Properties can help identify an unknown substance. So if you have collected a gas and you don't know that gas, you can try it out and find out if it supports burning. If it supports burning, the chances that the gas is oxygen is high. The chances that the gas is oxygen is high. That is what we mean. So, however, conclusive identification usually cannot be made based on only one property. So you should note that. You should note that. However, conclusive identification usually cannot be made based on only one property. So just that the fact that something conducts electricity does not give us a conclusive evidence that it is a metal. That does not give us a conclusive evidence that it's a metal. We will take an example here to make that clear. If you took, for example, carbon rods, some of these carbon rods, like graphite, are known to conduct electricity. So we cannot conclude that simply because a substance is able to conduct electricity, then it is a metal. That will be not the best conclusion. So comparison of several properties can be used together. Comparison of several properties. Comparison of several properties can be used to establish the identity of an unknown. The identity of an unknown. So what I mean here, for example, if we are looking at H2O water, then one, we will look at color. Two, we might look at odor. So how does it smell? Does it have smell or it does not have smell? Three, we might look at pH. And lastly, boiling point. So if it boils at 100 degrees Celsius, it does not have odor. It has a pH of 7 and it is colorless. then we can conclusively conclude that it is water. So properties are either intensive or extensive. Properties are either intensive or extensive. Properties are either intensive, properties are either intensive or extensive. So extensive properties depend on the amount of matter that is present. Extensive properties depend on the amount of matter, that is present. So here we will be looking at many factors here, such as volume, we will look at mass, and the amount of energy in that substance, and the amount of energy in a substance. So here we must base ourselves on the amount of matter that is present. We call this extensive property. In contrast, intensive property do not depend on the amount of matter present. In contrast, intensive property do not depend on the amount of matter present, So when we are looking at intensive properties here, we don't base ourselves on the amount, but rather we base ourselves on other properties and we don't really look at how much something is composed of. We don't look at quantity in this case, but rather we look at qualities. So if we are looking at qualities, they may include such properties as such properties include a melting point. So the melting point of a substance does not depend on the quantity, but rather depends on the quality. Then boiling point boiling point. Then we are looking at something else, density. We will be looking at density. So the density of an element does not depend on how much element you have. You can use any size to get the density. And ability to conduct electricity and ability to conduct electricity and ability to conduct electricity and to transfer energy as heat and to transfer energy as heat. All these properties are what we are calling intensive properties and not extensive. So intensive properties are the same for a given substance regardless of how much of the substance is present. For example, so if you took iron, which is a metal, it melts at 1538 degrees Celsius. So regardless of whether or not you have 20, regardless of whether you have 2 grams or 20 kilograms or 20 kilograms of it, the property will not change. The melting point will still remain the same. So properties can be grouped into two. Properties can be grouped into two as either being physical and chemical properties. Properties can be grouped into two. General types and that is physical and chemical properties. So in the next lesson, we will be looking at the difference between these two, the difference between physical and chemical properties. We will stop here for now.